Many have speculated that this is the prelude to the closure of the frontier. You yourself have spoken to the Junta and they have confirmed to you, I understand, that the frontier will not close. Can you elaborate, please, on your discussions?
So you will have seen this afternoon that Juanma Moreno gave a press conference in respect of his meeting or discussion video conference with the President of Spain, where all the autonomy presidents were present. He said there that he had reflected the position Gibraltar had taken in relation to the state of emergency. He was very favourable to the attitude that we had taken, and he was very positive on the attitude Gibraltar had taken. Later in his statement, he said that one of the things he had told President Sanchez was also that there had to be a plan about Spain's frontiers and how to deal with issues at Spain's frontiers. Someone in a Spanish newspaper speculated, therefore, that Senor Juanma Moreno was calling for a plan to close frontiers, including the frontier of Gibraltar. That became the headline in some regional online news agencies, and it, I think, would have created great confusion for people not to have that dealt with. I rang again this evening to talk to the President of the Junta. He has categorically confirmed to me that he is not calling for the closure of the frontier between Gibraltar and Spain, and that he believes Gibraltar is doing the right thing and taking exactly the right attitude. It's important that people who are looking to come into work tomorrow and who will look to come into work in coming days have that confidence.
So can you just clarify then about the movements that is possible across the frontier?
I cannot. No, I cannot. I'll tell you why not. The issue that you're asking me about is about an issue of Spanish law. What the government said, what my government said on Friday, as soon as we became aware that there would be a Spanish state of emergency declared, was that people in Gibraltar should start to familiarise themselves with what that meant, and that if possible, people should therefore not go to Spain. On Saturday, when the statement actually came out, we then said to people, you must now act in keeping with the statement. The statement is very clear. It's not about what happens at the frontier. It's about what happens all over the geography of Spain. Remember, the minute you cross the line into Spain, you are subject to Spanish law. And so the different interpretations that are being put on the decree at the moment, I think will be clarified in the wash in coming days, as not just people at the Gibraltar frontier, but people in the whole geography of Spain have to deal with what it means to be allowed to move for certain purposes and not for others.
This has hit us all very suddenly, and there are going to be Gibraltarians there who have been caught out.
Absolutely.
Now, there could be Gibraltarians who live in Spain. They may not be officially registered in Spain. That's going to prove difficult for them.
Indeed it is.
What happens if they don't have somewhere to live in Gibraltar?
So they need to get in touch with us quickly. They need to tell us what their issues are. Let me be very clear with people. Getting in touch with us does not mean putting something on a Facebook or Twitter or other social media site. They need to get in touch with the established channels that we have for getting in contact with the government. We have our email addresses on our websites. They all come in. They will all be dealt with. You have to be patient. There are many people who are going to be caught out. We're going to help, in cooperation with the Spanish authorities, to sort out the problems for all those who find themselves in a difficult position. But we all have to row in the same direction here. I have seen some absolutely ridiculous and scandalous things said on social media today, which are designed to upset people and to panic people. People should ignore those things, and they should look to official channels of communication, to yourselves and to other established media for the truth, and not rely on some of the stuff that they're seeing on social media.
Spanish frontier workers will require documentation, proof of employment when they turn up at the frontier tomorrow. Has the government provided that documentation as far as is possible to those cross-frontier workers, particularly those that work for the public services?
So the government is unable to provide an employment contract to 15,000 people in 24 hours, but people tend to have their own employment contract, or should have their own employment contract. If they do not, we will seek to be able to provide that as soon as possible during the course of the working week. We've put in place mechanisms we've published today so that the employment service is available entirely online to people. We have made sure that our key workers have a contract provided to them. The GHA has started to give it to everyone as they come into work, so that they have it both in English and in Spanish to be able to show. Let's be very clear. This is not a political Spain-Gibraltar issue. Your report was absolutely right. This is a public health emergency. We all have to help each other in Gibraltar, and we have to help each other across the frontier, and we have to work together. Thank goodness there is now good cooperation between our two administrations. We will be seeking to resolve those problems as and when they arise, and there will be people who unfortunately are caught out in this situation, who are perhaps tourists who find themselves in Spain, who need to come back to Gibraltar to catch an aircraft, etc. But there is no tourism going on. There is absolutely no question of there having been coaches coming into Gibraltar today full of tourists that have then not been allowed out. That is an absolute nonsense that is being put about by those who want to create panic and concern at the most difficult period that our community has faced, probably since the evacuation.
Let me just ask you about tomorrow morning, because, you know, this is where it's really going to start. People are going to be coming into work. So have you anticipated that there will be a number of people who won't be able to enter? They won't have their documentation with them at that time. But there will also be people, Spanish workers, who might choose to stay at home, A, because of COVID-19 fears, B, because schools have closed in Spain, so they may need to stay at home to look after their children. So there could be a shortfall in the workforce in Gibraltar, particularly, I think, where it's really important is at the hospital, for example, and perhaps other public services, but particularly at the GHA. Are you prepared for that shortfall tomorrow?
We absolutely are. We've made sure that we know where our key workers are and those who are going to come in and not going to come in. I can give you the confidence that all of our ICU staff are now in Gibraltar, and they're going to spend the next 15 days living in Gibraltar, even if they were living in Spain and will continue to live in Spain when the whole crisis is over. So the people we are most going to need at the top of this pyramid are our ICU staff. They will be here for this key period. We have multiplied by 500% our ICU capability in the last 7 days. So we're ready to deal with the beginning of this process. Now, we'll have to work with people to ensure that we flatten this curve, and therefore we can deal with the whole of this process. Tomorrow, we will be making new announcements as to more restrictions on movement. We've already announced that bars and restaurants and catering establishments will be closed. The key reason behind that is to stop the spread of the virus, and in particular, to stop those over 70 going out. I have a message for all those over 70. They are the ones at real risk of their lives. We're doing everything we can to help them. They need to stay home.
Can I ask you, practically speaking, a lot of these elderly people who are being told to stay home will require some sort of support and help. They may not all have relatives or friends that can bring them food, for example. Are there any measures in place to help remedy that?
So in an executive committee meeting this morning on COVID-19, we've already started to mobilise to ensure that as from tomorrow, we'll be able to make announcements as well as to where you'll be able to call if you are over 70 and you're caught out by these measures and you, for some reason or another, are not able to rely on an extended family or friends who can provide you with deliveries, or you can't obtain those deliveries commercially. There will be the equivalent. I'm not trying to be flippant, I'm trying to get people to understand what we're trying to do. The equivalent of Childline, but for those over 70, so that they can call, and what they need to see dealt with, whether it's an emergency in terms of stocks or supplies, or whether they need something else, will be able to deal with those issues. I want to thank everybody who's volunteered to the government in the past 48 hours. At the same time as I've seen some ridiculous nonsense on social media, I can see Gibraltar's heroes coming through and asking to volunteer and asking to help. We will be calling upon all of them in coming weeks, and I'm sorry to say probably months, to continue to help us through this process, and in particular to help us with those over 70 who need our help.
Well, we've seen schools close throughout Europe, and we know that in the UK, Boris Johnson has been criticised for not closing down schools over there. You had a meeting with the NASUWT here yesterday, but the decision is to remain open. Can you just give us the reasoning behind that? Lots of people are still expecting schools to close down.
And schools may close down, but the question is whether they should close down now or whether they should turn into a different sort of establishment. I want to thank the NASUWT, Unite and the GGCA for the approach that they've taken to this. The NASUWT issued a letter yesterday which I thought was explicit and clear. They're really stepping up. They came into that meeting of the view that we should close schools. They understood the science that was being put to us, and then they shared our view that the school should for now remain open. We're going to check that every 48 hours. I'm going to meet with the NASUWT and those giving us the advice every 48 hours to ensure it is still right. This is not about subjective decisions being made by politicians which might go one way or another. This is about analysing the geography and the demographics of each different community. We have the luxury of being able to do it for 30,000 people. Understand that if we close the schools tomorrow, we're going to push this virus into the place where the most vulnerable are. And we're going to also disable ourselves by shooting ourselves in the foot and stop those we need the most, our healthcare workers, many of whom will find that they have childcare problems, and we're going to find it very difficult to then provide the care that we need. So we're going to take a decision, I've said, with the NASUWT and with the science every 48 hours to make sure that we're doing the right thing. Already the department and NASUWT are looking at our shared concerns, vulnerable teachers, vulnerable children, because some children may be in the vulnerable class because of pre-existing conditions, although the virus seems to attack predominantly over 70-year-olds. That's the key issue, and how we deal with those issues going forward when schools may not be available as establishments for learning, but we need to turn them into a place where key workers can have their children if they don't have extended families that can help them, because those that are extended family members are over 70. This is a public health emergency. We have to deal with it with our heads on our shoulders and calmly, and not simply do what everybody else is doing. We must do what is right for Gibraltar.
Okay, I must ask you about the impact on the economy this is all going to have. You said yourself a moment ago that there is no tourism at the moment. We're not sure how long that's going to last. And you've ordered all bars, cafes and restaurants to close down. That's going to significantly affect those businesses. So what can you tell us about financial measures that the government might have to be able to help and support those businesses?
Let's be very clear. The first function of government is to secure the safety and security of our people. So we must make whatever decisions we have to make to secure the safety and security of our people. The second order is to ensure that we have a functioning economy, because that in turn helps us to secure the safety and security of our people. So tomorrow night I'm going to be making announcements in a ministerial statement, which will in effect be a mini budget that will try to address many of the concerns that the Chamber, the Federation of Small Business have put to me, and that the government itself has about the consequences of the measures that we are having to take to ensure that at the end of this process, we have a functioning economy. The whole world is going to go into recession. I believe it's very unlikely that Gibraltar will be able to avoid that as a result of these eventualities. Let's see what the numbers tell us months from now. From then, we'll have the luxury of being able to look backwards at the actions we've taken. We might even think that we acted properly or improperly. But the measures to affect business, to protect business, will start to be announced tomorrow, but then will be announced again as we review where we are. In 4 weeks' time, we will probably be in a very difficult situation, perhaps much more difficult than we are today. Today, which seems so difficult, might seem like a walk in the park compared to where we're going to be 4 weeks from now. So we need to have still more firepower to protect our businesses and our economy then. So don't expect everything tomorrow night. Tomorrow night is only the beginning.
OK, so as far as communicating to the public what's happening with COVID-19, the measures, what can we expect this coming week? Are there going to be daily press conferences? We'll continue to get the Gib Telecom text messages, I presume?
Yes, and we may even do a little more than that. There are offers for the government to be able to have direct channels of communication with the public. GBC is already stepping up in its role as public broadcaster to propagate a lot of the messages that Public Health Gibraltar needs to see put out there. And we are going to be saying a lot more tomorrow about what we intend to do. I want to be very clear. This week has been tough. Next week will be even tougher. By the end of this week, we might not imagine that the Gibraltar that we knew and loved is going to come back, but it will come back. And in order to ensure that it comes back and we have protected our most vulnerable, tomorrow I'll be announcing even more draconian measures to protect those most vulnerable in our community.